So far, we've concentrated on constructing bass lines with nothing more than the drums for company. And generally, that's the approach that a lot of dance musicians tend to take. Dance music's all about the groove, so it's not going to be unnatural to get the drums down, followed by the bass, to build that fundamental groove of the record. But it's not the only approach. If you're really struggling for a bass line or you're planning on writing a lead-driven track, it's often worthwhile actually writing a chord progression first, because what you can do is you can extract all the other instrumentation from that chord progression. Now that's a technique that a lot of pop producers and I know some dance producers take, because it can more or less present you with the entire track in one. They write a chord and then, well, truth be told, you don't actually write one. What you tend to do is you tend to steal one from another record. You write a bass and lead around that. You extract the bass and lead from it, and then you often delete the original progression and replace it with another one if you still want a progression in there. Now, obviously, this DVD isn't about building chord progressions, so I'm not going to stray off topic chatting about harmony, because, well, harmony is actually a particularly complex subject, and it would take me a good few hours to walk you through it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this short, and I'm simply going to say all good harmonies have pretty much been done before. You can sit there at your keyboard, try to come up with a chord progression, but I guarantee you that by the time you do come up with one, somebody somewhere has done it before. All you got to do is think about it laterally. Once you've decided on the mode and the key, you've got 7 notes. Yes, there's accidentals, but they don't play a role in a progression. So you've got 7 notes, and if you think about it, there's only so many harmonies and progressions that are going to work with 7 notes. Of course, I'm going to have someone who'll disagree with me there. That's fine. Go ahead, sit at your keyboard and create your own harmony. But for everyone else, a well-known production trick is to grab a copy of the Guinness Book of Best-Selling Records, or have a look on the internet for the 100 best-selling pop records. Pick out a song from there, find the MIDI file, and then delete everything from it in your sequencer except the chords. Once you have those chords, you can extract both the lead and the bass from those chords. And once you've got those, you've pretty much got your record. You can write a new chord progression if you want, but dance music is kind of less on the chord progressions and more on the bass and the leads. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump forward in true Blue Peter style, and here's a chord progression that I wrote earlier. It's not a complex chord progression, as you can see. It's actually quite simple. I'm playing it out to a preset in Albino 3, simply because this isn't a tutorial on chord progressions or how to program strings. So what I'll do, I'll just play that back for you now, and just have a quick listen to it. I did say it wasn't a particularly complex progression, and it is a very simple progression, but the purpose of this is to show you how you can create a bass line from a progression. So the first thing we want to do here is we want to copy our progression down onto our bass track there. So copy that down onto there. Make sure we're on that, and then what we need to do is we need to jump in and just keep the root notes of the chord that we've taken. And then I'll just enlarge that up. I just need to, oops. And then we'll just struggling with my mouse at the moment. It's the new Apple Magic Mighty Mouse, so it's a bit complicated. Now what we do is we stay on the same root notes as our harmony. Now, you may have seen me do this on the Trance DVD, I think Volume 2. It's what I always tend to do. If I'm writing any kind of progressive or uplifting trance, I'll always come up with a chord progression first, because then I can derive pretty much everything from that chord progression. It just makes it a lot easier. notes a little bit shorter. I don't think it really matters that much. Just to give you an idea. Right, let's just play that back now. And there you go. I mean, basically, that's the simplest way you can extract a bass from a chord progression. Now, that kind of bass would be suited for euphoric trance, uplifting. There's a few other genres that kind of use that offbeat, but it's mostly euphoric. Obviously, we don't have to stick with that offbeat rhythm that we've just tapped in there. There's nothing stopping us from basically tapping in our own rhythm on our keyboard as we did in an earlier session, and then just move that up and down in pitch with the root of the chord. I mean, basically, the extraction comes from the notes that we're using, so we can do any rhythm and we just basically copy the pitch that we're following along in our chord progression there. So what else can we do with that? Well, if you recall, I said the strongest notes in any scale were the root, the third, and the fifth notes. Now, if we go back now and think of what notes are in C sharp minor, now it's in your DVD pamphlet if you want to pull that out now. I'll try and work it out in my head now. It's C sharp, and then it'll go to D sharp, E, F sharp, and then G sharp, A, B. So the dominant of that note is going to be the G sharp. So know that the dominant is at G sharp. So what we can do is we'll just bring this back, because I'm sure you know now how you extract the pitch. All we need to do is we need to get some rhythms now. So we can take that, and all we have to do is copy these up to the G sharp, and then if we just take them, move them over to there, and then just play that back. Not particularly complicated there, but there's a bit of a rhythm there. You've got to remember that we haven't completed these grooves yet. We are going to be recalling these and programming timbres and processing and effects. This is concentrating on the composition at the moment, so that's what I want you to listen to, the composition, not the quality of the timbre. Now, we can augment that further by saying, well, the third note in the scale is also a strong note, so what we can do is we can shrink those down, say there, and then I think what we'll do is basically we'll take those, move those to E, and we can have a rhythm like that. That's sounding a little bit manufactured, so what we can do is move that away from the driving. Remember that the kicks carry the drive, so we move it away from the drive. We can now we could have even more there by placing the E onto the drive. Remember that the kick denotes the drive. So the bass note on the kick, it adds a little bit more drive. So we move these onto the drive. It means that our key isn't sat on the drive of the beat. That is, and that'll give a slightly different feeling to the rhythm. I'll just copy that one over there. Now at the moment we're still working basically on the root note of our chord, but once you've derived the key you can pretty much move to any note in this in your scale. It will sit still with the chord structure because we're using the same notes in the same key. So what we'll do, we'll delete those notes there and we'll just remain with these, and we'll take that, and there's nothing stopping us moving to any notes in this scale. So for example, we could move to a D sharp there. We just need to make sure that our top note's there, which is now on an A sharp, which isn't in C sharp minor, so we need to move those down to there, and we can play that. So basically we can move to any note in our range. All we're doing is we're saying, well, the strings are obviously written in C sharp minor, therefore we can use any notes in C sharp minor for our bass. What this does is this strengthens the rhythm, because we'll have the chords playing the strong notes. The chords are playing generally the strong notes in the rhythm, and our bass can play the weaker notes. So what I think we'll do, we'll take that down, we can put it to A down there. But what we'll do is we'll make an octave shift in bass, and we'll move these up to A there. What we'll do is just enlarge that a bit. Slightly off there. Oops. And we'll move that to there. Move these in time. Oops. And what we'll do is we'll copy these. All I'm trying to do is give you some examples of different rhythms and how we can derive them. So if we play this back now. Copy that off to there. Now, I'm sure some of you are watching this and thinking that these are all particularly simple bass lines, and well, yes they are. But as I've mentioned numerous times, you need to allow room for more instruments. Listen to any dance music record and you'll find that the bass is generally very simple. Even those that for example, bass line that are written around the bass is the key of the track. It's the focal point of the track. They're still very simple. You've got to keep a bass simple. If you make it too complicated, it's hard to dance to. And that's what the key is here. You've got to make it danceable. Now, a bass that consistently moves around the scale, moving up and down in keys and all over the place, is going to eat up space within your whole mix. And the idea of music is to gather a number of simple ideas together to generate that more complex whole. And it's this that I find is one of the biggest mistakes made by practicing producers. They try to create a whole number of complex elements. The bass is complex, the lead is complex, and then they try and mix these together to produce a more complex whole. But the thing is, it only results in too many ideas in a track, which makes it sounds complicated or convoluted. There's no focus there. The idea is simple ideas come together to make a simple track. So remember, what you've got to do is try and keep all your ideas simple, and that includes the bass. Try and keep this simple. Now, I think what we've basically done is we've reached the end of composition. You now know all the techniques and theory behind composing a bass line. You know how to derive modes, scales, you know the difference between strong and weak notes, you know how to add accidental notes, and now you know the basic principles for extracting the pitch from a harmony. Now you can do the same with leads there. You just copy the same theory and just stay in the same key. Now I think what we need to do is we need to start programming some timbres and start looking at processing effects to really start to make the bottom end of these gel together and groove our listeners. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at that in our next session.